Has the WWE gone soft, or have we just grown up? If you remember of the matches of Hogan and Savage and the Ultimate Warrior in the 80s, they didn't have to have blood to make it interesting. It was interesting because of the charisma of Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat and such great caliber wrestlers that were so great at what they did, and they trained and they put all the work in, and they just worked really, really hard to get to where they were. You know, they really worked hard to do what they did, and they had such a following that it made you think that it didn't matter what happened as long as the right thing happened. You know, as long as Hogan was champion and his charisma was carrying the company, what a character Hogan was to hold a company for, 10 years through the 80s all the way up to the early 90s, and held the company down as the face, as if it ain't like Mr. Cena back here. That's the way he is now compared to Hogan. You got to think that back then we were all children. We were all, what is this new thing that we see on TV where people beat each other up and fight? Like, they actually fight, they wrestle, there's interesting storylines and things like that nature. They really put a lot of work into it, and they really thought it out. Like, the builds were so good because there wasn't a lot of programming back then. There was only WWE, and there were only WCW. I mean, you had Smoky Mountain Wrestling, you had all the other independent circuits, but those were the two main wrestling corporations. And then, their contracts ran out with WWE, and Vince had his back against the wall because all he had was, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and just really Shawn Michaels is all he had, and The Undertaker. But if you think about it, The Undertaker came from WCW, well, NWA back in the 80s. He came from there to the WWE. And then, you had all the people that wrestled in the 80s, they left WWE. Hogan, his contract ran out, and he went to WCW. And that's how WCW got off the ground with Eric Bischoff. He had great writers. He had the interesting thing of, like, what can we do to be the number one corporation in wrestling, which at the time Hogan was on the downside of his career. So what better way to ask Hogan, do you want to turn heel? That in itself stopped everybody in their tracks, as if it would, John Cena turning heel. But everybody speaks about the Attitude Era and everything, like, we need to bring it back. We need to get back to that kind of wrestling and things like that. But it didn't really matter when we were kids. It only mattered when, we saw the person that we liked the most wrestle. Because you would never think that Hogan would turn heel. But when he did, it just changed the face of wrestling. That was the only reason that the Attitude Era happened. Because Vince McMahon had his back against the wall, 4 years of champion of Shawn Michaels. He couldn't carry the company. Steve Austin was just coming along in WWE. And Shawn Michaels had the title for 2 years, and nobody was watching it because they were watching Hogan, for 2 years in WCW fighting the Giant. He actually was making it out to be like Andre's son, and he was a good guy. But when he turned heel and Kevin Nash and all the WWE superstars came along, basically WCW, with the exception of Sting and Flair, was the WWE, with all the stars of the WWE turning heel. So that's why that worked. The Attitude Era was just picking at straws to hang on. That's the only reason the Attitude Era happened. Like Wrestling Jesus said, it was trash TV. WWE just took every idea that they could just to stay on TV. If you realize, in the mid-90s, WWE got kicked off USA and went to TNN, and actually they were on CMT, a country music station. They were on CMT for 6 months. They didn't even have a contract hardly. WWE was going under because Hogan turned heel, and everybody was wondering, like, what happened to Hogan? All these superstars from WWE are on WCW now, and then WWE just had to do something to keep people watching. So they took all the aspects of Jerry Springer, they took all the aspects of Girls Gone Wild and things that were popular in the genre of that time, and they put it all together and in one man or two men of Stone Cold and The Rock, because Shawn Michaels was off looking for his smile. He lost his smile. So that's why he just left, and his back was so messed up that where Undertaker clotheslined him over the top rope and he hit his back that he couldn't even wrestle. So Steve Austin and them had to take it, and Steve Austin didn't really care. All he wanted to do was drink a beer and show off. So he was like, "Yeah, we'll do it." And The Rock was Rocky Maivia. He came out in the stringy, Samoan outfit or whatever, and he was like, JR told him, said, "How would you feel about turning heel?" Because JR was the one that was writing it. He was the one that signed everybody. He's the one that signed The Rock, Stone Cold. He brought The Undertaker in. Everybody that came in the mid-90s, JR brought in. So when he decided to turn The Rock heel and Stone Cold face, pretty much it worked. All the trash TV that, people talk about, it worked. Because how can you face a company that has all the stars that you used to have now in WCW writing for the heel turns, and everybody was watching it? I mean, they took over. They were the legitimate wrestling company. I remember going to school and saying, "Did you see what happened on Nitro last night?" Because I would record Raw and, watch Nitro. But Eric Bischoff started ruining that for me because he ended up telling the results of it on the live show, because it got so bad for WWE that they started recording it. I mean, that is sad. That all it took was Hulk Hogan turning heel to make the Attitude Era all happen. That's the only reason that it happened. And after you sit back and watch it, and you saw WWE go under, and Vince McMahon flashing his money around, because he did have money. He still had money from Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and Savage and Steamboat, Jake the Snake, and all the people. He still had the money, so he decided to flex his muscles and buy his competition. So he bought his competition, shut it down, and there was no need for the Attitude Era anymore. How would you need something of that value to do away with something that's not even there? What I mean by this is, the only reason the WWE did this is because they were being challenged by WCW. And after Hogan left and they shut down the company and everything, that's why you started seeing Goldberg come to WCW, WWE, Booker T coming to WWE, and all the stars started coming back because they didn't have anywhere to wrestle on big network television. And then, they had the Homecoming in like 2005 of USA Network, and by that time all of us were pushing our mid-25s and almost into our 30s, so all the kids grew up that watched the Attitude Era and watched Hogan in the 80s and things like that. That's what it is now. It's PG again because there's no competition to hold them down to say that it has to be any different. There's TNA, but, they're just now becoming relevant. So, they're doing the blood thing with aces and eights and stuff like that, and now blood's starting to come back in WWE. But I think remotely what caused the Attitude Era was the Hogan heel turn, and why we're thinking that all this is trash is because that we've grown up and realized that wrestling just doesn't have, all the hoopla and glory that it used to. We have pretty good characters, but it takes 10 years to build a character. So, we watch and we suffer through it. But if we put our mindset into the children's mindset of how we were back in the 80s, then it's really the same. Because John Cena is like the Hogan of the modern era. He gets so much heat. He gets so much, let's go Cena, Cena sucks. The girls love him, the guys hate him. It's not really the same, but charisma-wise, it is the same as Hulk Hogan. So that's why I think that we've all grown up and we have to settle with what we've got. And UFC really took a toll on them too. So why would people want to watch storylines when they can watch, boxing, martial arts, and everything combined? So that's what I think happened. It's like UFC is going through it now because they have Bellator and all the other companies that do it. Even my cousin does it in, my hometown. So it's like, as wrestling was big back then, MMA is big now. So what I think, what it all boils down to is what I stated in the previous statement, is that we've all grown up and now it's the kids' turn. I want to thank you for watching, and I know that we still matter, because we're the ones buying the merchandise. But at the same time, our time is done pretty much, and with it, the Attitude Era and everything died. So, just enjoy what you have. At least wrestling's still on TV. I want to thank you all for watching, and remember, we all have a video camera, we all have internet, and we all have an opinion.